In the small town of San Isidro, Nueva Ecija, lived Mang Lando, a poor farmer who worked tirelessly on his tiny piece of land. With his loyal carabao Cardo, playful goat Luna, and clever rooster Tuco, he faced each day with hope despite the cracked soil and empty sky. His wife, Aling Rosa, stayed by his side, bringing him water in an old jar and whispering words of faith whenever despair crept in. One morning, a letter arrived from the mayor, warning that his land would be taken if he failed to pay his debts. A few days later, a man named Tomas came in a shiny car, offering quick money for the land. Lando refused, saying his father's sweat still lived in the soil. Angered, Tomas left, swearing he'd return. That night, a heavy storm came, flooding their small hut and destroying their crops. Rosa cried in fear, but at dawn, Tuco's crow broke the silence, giving them a sign of hope. Weeks passed, and tiny green shoots began to rise from the ground. With the help of his animals and unwavering faith, Lando worked day and night. Soon the golden rice fields returned, brighter than ever before. The villagers were amazed at the miracle. When Mayor Dela Cruz came to see, he praised Lando for his strength and spirit. Standing in his field, surrounded by his animals, Lando smiled proudly and said, "They called me poor, but my heart has always been rich." Mang Lando's days began before sunrise, his hands rough from years of tilling the soil in San Isidro. Each morning, Tuco's crow signaled the start of another struggle for survival. His carabao Cardo pulled the plow through the hard, dry ground while Luna the goat played nearby, nibbling at weeds. Aling Rosa, his devoted wife, would bring him water and food, her eyes filled with quiet strength. Though they owned little, their hearts were full of faith. One afternoon, the mayor's messenger arrived with a letter that made Rosa's hands tremble. It warned that their land could be taken for unpaid taxes. That night, Lando sat outside under the moon, whispering to Cardo, "This land holds my father's dreams. I can't lose it." The next day, Tomas, a greedy buyer, came with an offer to purchase the land for a small amount. Lando refused, his voice steady but filled with pain. A violent storm soon followed, tearing through their crops and flooding their hut. Rosa wept as everything they worked for washed away. But at sunrise, Tuco crowed loudly, and Lando took it as a sign to rise again. Together, with his animals, he replanted the fields. Weeks later, the land bloomed with golden rice once more. The villagers gathered in awe, calling it a miracle. When Mayor Dela Cruz arrived, he praised Lando's courage. With a smile, Lando said, "We are not rich in money, but we are rich in faith and love, and that's enough." In the quiet farming town of San Isidro, Mang Lando began another long day under the blazing sun. His hands were rough, his back bent from years of labor, but his spirit remained strong. With his faithful carabao Cardo pulling the plow, the dry soil cracked beneath their feet. Luna the goat leaped around happily, while Tuco the rooster crowed as if cheering them on. Aling Rosa arrived with lunch wrapped in banana leaves, saying softly, "Someday, our hard work will bear fruit." But that hope dimmed when a letter from Mayor Dela Cruz arrived, warning that their land would be seized for unpaid debts. The news struck like lightning. Lando held the paper tightly, whispering, "This soil is my father's blood. I won't let it go." Days later, Tomas, a wealthy land buyer, drove up with an offer. He waved cash in Lando's face, saying, "Sell now, or lose everything." But Lando refused, pride glowing in his tired eyes. Soon after, a fierce storm hit San Isidro. The wind howled, trees fell, and their small hut flooded. Rosa wept, believing they'd lost all hope. Yet, when the storm passed, Tuco crowed again at dawn, signaling a new beginning. Lando, with his animals, started replanting. Weeks later, green sprouts covered the field, growing into golden rice. The whole town came to see what they called a miracle. Standing among his animals, Lando smiled and said, "We may be poor, but faith makes our hearts richer than gold." In San Isidro, a humble farmer named Mang Lando rose before dawn each day. His small hut stood beside the fields where his loyal Carabao Cardo waited, ready to plow the earth. Luna, the playful goat, and Tuco, the proud rooster, kept the family company. His wife, Aling Rosa, prepared rice and water, always reminding him, God helps those who never give up. Their life was simple, yet full of quiet love. One scorching morning, a letter arrived from Mayor de la Cruz. It warned that if Lando couldn't pay his land tax soon, his farm would be taken. Fear gripped Rosa's heart. A few days later, Tomas, a greedy land buyer, came with a tempting offer. He smiled falsely and said, "Take the money, old man, and rest." Lando shook his head firmly, replying, "I was born on this soil, I'll die on it too." That night, dark clouds gathered. A violent storm ripped through San Isidro, flattening their crops. Rosa wept, and Lando sat silently, staring at the flooded land. But when dawn came, Tuco crowed loud and proud. Lando took it as a message, hope was not gone. Together with Cardo and Luna, he began planting again. Weeks later, green fields stretched as far as the eye could see. The villagers couldn't believe how life returned. When Mayor de la Cruz visited and praised him, Lando smiled gently and said, "Riches fade, but faith and love grow stronger than any storm." In the small farming town of San Isidro, Mang Lando woke up before sunrise to the sound of Tuco's proud crow. His faithful Carabao Cardo waited patiently near the field, while Luna the goat playfully ran around their bamboo hut. Aling Rosa handed him a bowl of rice and said, "Someday, this land will reward our faith." With sweat on his brow and determination in his heart, Lando began another hard day of plowing. But peace turned to worry when a letter came from Mayor de la Cruz, warning that the farm would be taken for unpaid debts. Rosa's eyes filled with tears, yet Lando stood firm, saying, "No one can buy the soil that holds my father's dreams." Soon after, Tomas, a rich and greedy land buyer, came offering money to take the land. Lando refused, knowing his dignity was worth more than gold. One night, a storm hit San Isidro with roaring winds and endless rain. The crops were destroyed, and their hut nearly collapsed. Rosa cried, "We've lost everything." Lando looked out into the dark, heartbroken but silent. When morning came, Tuco crowed loudly, and a ray of light broke through the clouds. Taking it as a sign, Lando started again. With faith, sweat, and help from his animals, the land began to bloom once more. Golden rice waved under the sun, shining like hope reborn. Surrounded by his animals, Lando smiled and said, "We are poor only in coins, not in heart." In the peaceful town of San Isidro, Mang Lando began each morning before the sun rose, guided by the sound of Tuco's crow. His loyal Carabao Cardo pulled the plow while Luna the goat danced around the field, bringing a touch of joy to their humble life. Aling Rosa, his loving wife, stood by him through every hardship, reminding him, faith feeds the soul more than food fills the stomach. Their simple happiness was shaken when a letter arrived from Mayor de la Cruz, warning that their land would be taken for unpaid taxes. Lando's hands trembled as he read the words. Soon after, Tomas, a rich land buyer, arrived with a smug smile and said, "Sell your land, old man. You can't fight the world." Lando looked him in the eye and replied, "I may be poor, but this land is my honor." A furious storm struck that night, destroying their crops and flooding their hut. Rosa wept as the rain poured through the roof. Lando sat silently, praying for strength. At dawn, Tuco's crow broke the silence, echoing across the wet fields like a call from heaven. Refusing to surrender, Lando and his animals replanted everything. Weeks later, the fields turned golden once more. The villagers called it a miracle. When Mayor de la Cruz visited to praise him, Lando smiled, surrounded by Cardo, Luna, and Tuco, and said softly, "True wealth isn't in land or gold, it's in the heart that never gives up."